The Wicked King and the Poor Orphan. Once upon a time in the quiet village of Ekpoma, there lived a king named Odian. He was known far and wide for his cruelty. His people lived in fear, for the king's word was law, and his punishments were severe. Odian ruled with an iron fist, taking from the poor to fill his treasury. His palace stood tall and grand, a symbol of his wealth and power. While the king lived in luxury, the villagers barely had enough to eat. Fields were barren, and many homes were crumbling, but King Odian cared only for his growing wealth. Among the villagers was a young orphan named Ifosa. Ifosa had lost his parents to a mysterious illness when he was just 5 years old. Now 12, he lived alone in a small hut made of mud and palm leaves. Ifosa was a kind and hardworking boy, often seen helping others in the village despite his own struggles. He gathered fruits from the forest and shared them with hungry neighbors. Even in his poverty, he was selfless. One fateful day, King Odian announced that every villager must pay a new tax. The tax was so high that even the wealthiest farmers in Ekpoma were left with little to survive. The announcement struck fear into the hearts of everyone. Ifosa, who had nothing, was confused. How could he pay what he did not have? But the king's soldiers warned everyone, those who failed to pay would face imprisonment. The boy worried about his future. Terrified but determined, Ifosa decided to approach the king. He believed that if he explained his situation, the king might have mercy. So, on a sunny afternoon, he walked to the grand palace. The guards at the palace sneered at him as he approached the gates. "What business does a filthy orphan have here?" one of them mocked. Ifosa pleaded with them to let him see the king. After much hesitation, they allowed him inside. When Ifosa entered the king's court, he bowed low and spoke with a trembling voice. "Your Majesty, I am Ifosa, an orphan with nothing to my name. I beg you to spare me from the tax. I have no family, no land, and no gold to offer." The king glared at the boy. "Do you think my palace runs on pity?" he thundered. "Everyone must pay, even a wretched orphan like you. If you cannot pay, you will work for me until your debt is cleared." With that, Ifosa was dragged out of the court and forced into the palace kitchens. His job was to clean pots, fetch water, and do other menial tasks from dawn until midnight. Life became even harder for him. The palace staff treated him harshly, often giving him leftover scraps to eat. Ifosa worked without complaining, holding on to the hope that the king might release him one day. Weeks turned into months, and his suffering continued. One day, while cleaning the king's chambers, Ifosa stumbled upon a hidden diary. Curious, he opened it and began to read. To his shock, the diary revealed a side of King Odian that no one knew. The diary spoke of a time when King Odian was a kind and generous prince. But his heart had turned cold after losing his wife and child in a fire many years ago. Ifosa felt a pang of sympathy for the king. That night, while everyone in the palace slept, Ifosa sneaked into the royal gardens. He plucked the most beautiful flowers he could find and arranged them in a basket. Then he placed the basket outside the king's door with a note. The note read, "Even a heart broken by fire can bloom again." When the king found the basket and the note the next morning, he was enraged. At first, he thought it was a mockery. But as the days passed, the king couldn't stop thinking about the words. He began to watch Ifosa closely, observing the boy's kindness and determination. Slowly, the king's heart began to soften. One evening, King Odian summoned Ifosa to his chambers. "Why did you leave that note?" he asked. Ifosa hesitated but then replied, "Because I see your pain, your Majesty. And I believe you can still be the kind man you once were." The king was silent for a long time. Then, for the first time in years, he smiled, a small, sad smile. "You remind me of my son," he said softly. Ifosa's words had touched him deeply. From that day on, King Odian began to change. He reduced the taxes, freed those imprisoned for their inability to pay, and ordered his soldiers to treat the villagers with kindness. Ifosa became the king's most trusted advisor, and the two formed a bond that felt like that of a father and son. The villagers began to love their king once more. Years later, when King Odian passed away, he left the throne to Ifosa, who ruled with compassion and fairness. Under his leadership, Ekpoma flourished,